Good evening and welcome to my presentation. It's been a great pleasure to join myself in a short presentation about teaching science virtually. Okay, to begin with, I would like to acknowledge the presence of my supervisor, Mr. Mesake Takuturekete. Since we live in the Pacific, we are isolated. The islands in a vast ocean, and there's a great shift of skills required of us. Our life essential skills that we required in the 21st century, make an access and availability and increase access and availability in ICT tools, which requires us teachers and students to integrate them into our curriculum. As we can remember, this is normally how a traditional classroom works, okay? You are given work to do, you have hands-on tools, and you share with peers, and you work in a group. This is how a virtual classroom looks like. You learn the same thing, the same concept from elsewhere, or you are behind a screen, okay? Or it has been recorded for you to view later. A brief introduction at the back of why I was interested in this particular topic. There has been a great shift of life skills essential, like I have said, that influence both our teaching and learning. Our revolution stimulates a new virtual classroom options to replace, okay, to become an alternative besides our traditional classrooms. This is still mainly to the increased access to telephone, mobile phones, to iPads, to computer laptops, and to other ICT devices. There is also a call internationally regarding the Sustainable Development Goals, like you have heard, Millennium Development Goals, and few other goals that we have to gear up to. We are thinking of integrating ICT into teaching and learning. And this, if we are integrating it into teaching and learning, we have to vary our teaching approaches as well, and our learning tools that our students are actually accessing to achieve higher grades or to achieve higher marks. So in this brief presentation, I'm going to demonstrate some researches and to share with you if virtual learning teaches science better than a traditional classroom. The rationale behind my study, like I have told you, there are goals, international goals that we have to gear up to and to align to, and alongside the Pacific, we are working towards it, including our very own Ministry of Education. And in response, some of the science classrooms in primary and high schools, even in tertiary levels, in our science courses, we integrate ICT. I do believe that the findings of this study will be a baseline, will help to determine whether the success of the students are based on virtual. Not only that, but it will help to inform our policy, our framework of what to change and what not to change. The whole aim is to investigate whether teaching students virtually improve our results in our classroom, in our science classroom. And I have objectives there. The first one was to examine what kind of tools do my students have. Okay? I give you an email expecting you to receive it instantly. I never ask you whether you have an internet connection. To identify teaching approaches, I paste my approaches on a virtual. I record it and send it over to you, but I have never figured out whether it actually worked for you or not. To discuss the importance of teaching science skills virtually in a Pacific classroom in Tonga High School, for example. My research question, which I have to answer at the end of the presentation, whether ICT tools or facilities available for teaching science schools virtually in Tonga High, or what would be the approaches that I will cater. The content topics that I will cover here, I will cover virtual unlimited classroom. Virtual classroom is an unlimited classroom for all ages from preschool up to higher education. Students' attitude towards virtual stimulated classrooms, teaching virtually hands-on skills, how learning is better virtually, and the effectiveness of virtual reality-based teaching and learning, and the conceptual change shifting core science to our virtual classroom. First, some of the researchers like Tonga and Lorenzo, they have said that the virtual classroom is unlimited. Why? Why is it unlimited? Because it is easy to set up and it's just placed there for whoever that will come. Whether you come early, you come late at night, you still can access it. It's less cost and it empowers creativity because I can do many demonstrations and give it to you in one session rather than just using 1 hour to demo just one single thing. You get it? Easy access and availability. With my stand, I think I do agree. The virtual classroom is unlimited and it helps both government and mission schools that they couldn't afford to set up a proper science lab. Okay? A proper science lab that the Form 7 could only use and the lower forms are neglected. No. In a virtual classroom, the accessibility. Okay? Franklin and Twin Trackers, they argue that a virtual stimulated classroom, they foster positive attitude. He says the attitude, it depends on how you think. Attitude or mental capacity towards your learning, then it will make your learning successful. And most of us, like our kids or even us at home, we prefer reading from our iPad rather. Every time I tell you, whether you print it out and come with it to class, you will prefer that you have it on your phone rather. That you have clear instructions. Sometimes our language, we do not make clear instructions, but you read it better on your PowerPoint. It empowers your imagination. If it's an actual science lab that I'm demonstrating how to separate oil from vinegar, you will refer it to you how many times. If you have missed step 1 and come in late to class, you can also view it later. You can always view it again and again. And also very learning environment. Okay? Some argue that using a virtual classrooms have multiple discoveries. Okay? It is more student-centered. Instead of me telling you, spoon-feeding you question and answers, you happen to decide on your own to look for your own answers. It includes stimulation and active experiment, that there are variety techniques. Some of the video, which I would be recording on science skills, would be different from someone who has a softer voice. And you learn better when you hear a person with a softer voice. Okay? So those are the variations in our technique. Next to it, you have greater opportunity for self-review. You can always come back to it anytime. And lastly, if the instructions is clear, it will cover many of the learning outcomes in one session rather than me trying to complete by the end of the week. How learning is better virtually. Sandwich and Finkelstein, they argue that in a normal classroom there are too many factors that hinder learning. They said the sitting arrangement like we have here. So if it's crowded, we have to share field. We don't have enough resources for everyone in a normal classroom. You don't have your share, you can't learn today. In this one, limited resources is not a problem in a virtual classroom. There could be variety of tools that reach you, and there are maximum number of experiments demonstrated that you can choose from. The effectiveness of virtual reality based on teaching and learning. Toyn and Franklin said, designed to cater for the ability of the student. Not only that, but it it somehow helps you with your cognitive development. Okay, it gives you simpler form of instruction and then get you up to thinking to advance more questions. Not only that, but the illustrations are said to be more enlightening, that it helps you to visualize things, what is actually happening behind the veil. Inside a normal Tongan classroom, we have varied our approach in teaching and learning in so many ways. And today, I agree with virtual learning approach. Conceptual changes in core science, DeWitt and Franklin, they complement that the virtual classroom has less cost. Okay, like we do here, there are only few of us and we engage from home. We do not need a bigger institute. Okay, we do not need a bigger theater to fit everyone. And then this safety and enhancing quality of learning basic science skills, that you don't have to go and argue for chemicals or compete with others. We learn better through observations, and like the say, when the students are happy, they learn better. Those were just methodologies that I used. Using qualitative approaches that will face interview some students by using stratified sample, random sampling, and Talanoa, and lastly the analysis of the data based on classical research. To conclude, coming back to my research questions, what are ICT tools or facilities available for teaching science schools in Tonga High? There is an increased availability, and to tell you that over 60% of the students, they access to smartphones, to iPads, to tablets, and to computers. They own it, but it's somewhere else. Okay? The findings indicate that the students do access and they do prefer virtual classrooms, and it aligns with what we have recommended. We have stated. What would be the teaching approaches in order to achieve maximum pass in science? We, I believe, like we have suggested, virtual is an unlimited classroom. It is there, you access whatever time you are comfortable with. Your virtual stimulated classroom, it fosters your attitude. When your attitude towards the study changes, your results changes as well. Okay? Multiple discovery for teaching virtually. Some of us, we have to compete for chemicals, compete for resources, compete to come to the lab, and plus the time is not fast. But when we do multiple discoveries through a virtual learning environment, we agree that we learn better that way. How learning is better virtually? By varying teaching approaches. Your classroom is more flexible and more approachable for you. And not only that, but it encourages all of us with a positive mindset of how to develop ourselves by knowing what we need to revise, and how we're going to help ourselves to improve. Lastly, is the shift that we have seen from cost, very expensive to travel, very expensive to go into a formal classroom, whereas you can do it virtually and online like we are doing here. All right? Any questions? Yes, Coca.
Kaya it will take away kafai na urunga ani ko ni tabe ko kita masih na virtual classroom enough na wapi oku ekegi fi ha wiki apiako ayo ni hang lebe to urunga ko ani ko tau ni tai ni pe mo to kan ke faya ko like they say it's yes, it's good in for full and more from the classroom, but the nilava never get always here you tafa akiko ya where ka alu ya ka na we ano mahalo ete ne blues e ni fa toka nga ki alu na we dai ni what do you have to say about that?
Okay. Thank you so much, Koka, for your question. I would just like to translate what Koka was asking. Koka was after what characteristic of a student or what characters of a student will be missing if he doesn't come to class, or if he'll be just taking virtual education from home, especially if you are a father, okay? Because you will have so much care about how the full potential of how your little son or daughter grow, okay? But then there are characters missing, like associating with others. They will be missed, okay? Like keeping up with time, coming to class. He will lose interest in joining a whole real world. The person will be isolating himself just because of virtual learning. He hasn't access to join others in a classroom. Or even there are few skills missing.
Like social skills.
Social skills, motor skills, other skills that a person is entitled to develop when you work in a group or when you come into a normal classroom. About arguments. Thank you, Koka, for raising that question. Any other question from the floor? Yes, Palay.
Like virtual learning compared to traditional learning. And where you're talking about science, and science is pretty much probably close to 50% is hands-on.
Hands-on tools.
When you do research, when you try to mix other chemicals with, especially in the classroom setting. And that's probably the best learning scenario for a science student. What would take that place of hands-on learning in the classroom in a science setting where you take it to a virtual classroom?
Okay, thank you so much, Paula, for your question. Like I have argued that the virtual classrooms teach science skills better than in an actual traditional approach. You have the whole procedures demonstrated to you virtually, but hands-on tool will prove the solution. And science is all about problem solving. We have claimed that we can teach all skills virtually, okay? But hands-on tools, like you have said, there are certain things to test, to prove, which you would require to do it yourself. But the whole procedures of how to do it, the whole method can be demonstrated virtually.
I was interested when you were talking about the safety, because as a parent and knowing your son is doing science, for example, like chemistry, they are hands-on with chemicals, and I think for me, I would like to hear more about
The
safety. If you want to ask you about is a lot of the things that we learn on the virtual classroom is already discovered. When we're learning on the actual classroom, in a science lab, that's where you tend to discover something else by accidentally mixing something together. Do you think that discoveries might be limited because of a virtual?
Thank you so much, Koka. You have raised, you have escalated my point of view to another level. What do I mean by that? Is because I have argued that that you develop cognitive development better when you are studying through virtual learning. And I have also claimed that through virtual learning, it's more safer. With that argument having in mind that you have said that you discover only when you do practicals on your own. I have argued that to make more discoveries because they have been demonstrated, like you have said, there have been findings, okay? Based on that, you can discover more. Safety. How safe will be virtual learning? Of course, you're not involved with graphical matters, but you can hands-on tools behind a virtual screen. You can do your experiment through learning. You know, how we bake cake by studying the steps and the recipes displayed on a virtual demonstration. Okay? So you discover more in your imaginations and visualizations through a virtual classroom rather than going there to wait for your chance whether you're going to have it this year or not. Because you are in control. When you are behind the virtual classroom, you are in control of your whole safety. Anybody else? Yes, Talfa.
Thank you, Maria. It's a very good presentation. I learned take a lot from the presentation. I'm just concerned based on security-wise in terms of ITs, because if you continue doing virtual machine, like for safety, we just start as a developed country, and in the future it's going to be more and more and more virtual. So to have that virtual, you either download it or you copy it by flash drive. For security-wise, how can you protect them? How can you teach the young generation to protect the system, like iPad, computers, from hacking of intruders?
Very good. On security, the safety part of the virtual of the arguments, I was only concerning about the persona, but with the ICT involvement, it has to be raised into another level. So with the security regarding the use of virtual classrooms and with the focus here in secondary schools, I do believe that I have lagged somewhere. Okay, and it's a very good ground that you have put up there for me to see. And when we introduce virtual learning or actually integrate it into our education system. Thank you, Dalfa. Thank you, everyone, and I hope that will be the last question for me this evening. And otherwise, learning is more effective when it is active. When you are active, you learn better. And I do not know how to do chemistry. My strength lies in biology. There's no way I could help you better than a virtual classroom. However, in a normal classroom, you have a basic process of growing, making a crop, only to pass your exam. For that is the tradition, exam oriented.